name's Kristen Snyder. I'm a postdoc with the Singita Grumeti Fund in Colorado State University. So I'm here today representing the Singita Grumeti Fund to talk a bit about our issues and strategies with human-elephant conflict in the Western Serengeti. And so at the fund, we have three main divisions. There's law enforcement, community outreach, and research and monitoring. And so in those first two divisions, we have longstanding programs related to preventing the illegal extraction of resources and community development focused on benefit sharing. But I'm not going to talk about either of those today, and instead I'm going to focus on our much more recent efforts to engage in conflict prevention. So this is pretty new for us, and I'm going to focus on our recent trials with trying to implement a mobile mitigation unit and talk about some of the challenges we've had with that. Okay, for some context, with our government partners, we're responsible for managing about 350,000 acres in the western corridor of the Serengeti. It's comprised of the Grumeti and Ikorango Game Reserves, the Icona WMA, Sasakwa Concession, and part of Makunduzi Village Grazing Land. We have Serengeti National Park to the east and south, Mara region to the north, and Lake Victoria to the west. And so this area is characterized by very large populations of wildlife that have increased pretty dramatically in the last 15 years. So most notably, we have elephant populations that have increased by 3-fold and lion populations by 16-fold. The reserve boundary is a really hard edge between the protected area and human-dominated areas along much of the boundary. So agricultural fields that extend right up to the reserve edge. We also find in this area the largest human population of those adjacent to Serengeti National Park. So it's a really kind of perfect storm for human-wildlife conflict. One of our top management issues is human-elephant conflict. So human-elephant conflict dominates all of our reports of human-wildlife conflict in the area. Of reports that are submitted to agricultural officers, human-elephant conflict accounts for 93%. It's also very widespread, so it occurs along the entire length of the boundary and up to at least 20 kilometers from the reserve. A recent survey found that 79% of households within 10 kilometers of the reserve experienced damage to crops by elephants in 2016. In that survey, community members also identified elephants as the primary threat that they face to crop production. So whether that is perception or realized could be up for debate, but perception matters. And so to briefly go over the scope of our current activities, we've spent quite a bit of time now trying to understand the extent of conflict. So we're using household surveys and spatial models to understand where and when conflict is occurring, and also using that information to produce spatial models, spatial predictions of where conflict is likely to occur, and then to use this to prioritize areas for management and intervention. We're also continuously monitoring conflict in 10 villages adjacent to the reserve, so we work with village agricultural officers. We collect field-level data at the time of damage and are using that to monitor trends in conflict over time and to assess different factors in their contribution to damage severity. We very recently, as in like we finished 2 days ago, just fitted 12 elephants with GPS collars. And so we're using this as a very initial testing ground for developing an early warning system for when elephants leave the protected area and enter communities. So we'll use the near real-time data from the GPS collars in combination with geofencing to send alerts to both protected area managers and hopefully community members as well. So with the community aspect, what we're aiming for is to inform elephant task forces that have been formed by community members that elephants are proximate to their village. On the reserve side, when alerts come into managers, our team will allocate resources accordingly for units to respond. So this got messed up. No, it didn't. Okay, so we also have a dedicated community hotline. So we installed a toll-free number that is totally dedicated to community use to be able to call in about issues that they're experiencing, including human-wildlife conflict. So community members can call in about active and past events. These calls are routed into our ops room, which is similar to the system described by John and John at LEWA, where we have the DAS that was created by Vulcan. And so our ops team will receive those calls and then allocate a response accordingly. One of the units that can receive calls is our human-wildlife conflict mitigation unit. So we just implemented this unit in August. I would say it has not really been fully effective until this past early December, late November. And so a little bit about this team. It's composed of 6 individuals, 4 of which are Singita Grumeti Fund Game Scouts and 2 are from Tawa. They have a dedicated vehicle. They underwent training by WildAid on how to use different deterrents and also escalation tactics for using those deterrents appropriately. The unit is based in the community, so right where that little dot is, in Hunyari village in Bunda district, and they have a specific geographic zone that they're responsible for responding to that extends about 40 kilometers along the length of Grumeti Game Reserve and Bunda district. Their responsibilities include primarily responding to active events as they're reported, but we also encourage them to follow up on past events, or if they were already engaged one place and couldn't make it to another event, to follow up with those landowners on what damage occurred. And we really see the goal of this unit as twofold. Of course, the primary being to prevent human-elephant conflict whenever possible, but we also think a really important component of their work is engaging with community members and being a presence within the community. So again, still very early stages. We've experienced some qualitative successes. So the first is that we've gotten really positive feedback from the community about the presence of this unit. We've received requests to fund additional units, which we think is a positive. Right now we're focusing on maximizing the efficiency of this unit before we make the decision to add more. But in general, we think that the presence of this unit in the community is really appreciated. Second is that it's been a great opportunity to collaborate with our government partners. The fact that it's a collaboration between Singita Grumeti Fund and Tawa, I think is a very important component, where it's not just one organization or the other, it's an opportunity to address human-elephant conflict together. So far, we've seen modest rates of success in deterring elephants. So in 65% of active events, elephants have been able to be deterred from shambas. And we're hoping that with improved protocols and communication that these metrics will improve over time. So with this, we faced a number of challenges with implementing the unit, which is what I want to focus on for the remainder of the time. So the first and the greatest challenge we face is just awareness of the unit's presence in the community. And we really underestimated this, I think, when we rolled the unit out. It was a much slower rollout than we thought it would be. So with awareness, it was getting the word out just that the unit was available and present in the community, what their role should be, how to contact the unit, and what the reporting network should look like, and especially when to call. And that has been our biggest barrier to date. We want to focus on preventing conflict, not necessarily having to drive elephants out after they've already entered shambas. So really encouraging community members that they should be calling as soon as elephants are sighted, not hopefully after they've already entered farms. And so to address this, right now we're undergoing a pretty extensive village by village campaign to meet with all of the village leaders as well as community members and to reiterate what the unit is there to do, the protocols for getting in touch with them, and a really big emphasis on early communication. Another second challenge that we were not expecting was false reports. Some people just apparently liked to call in and say there were elephants present, and we found out later that there were not any, and the unit had basically been driving around aimlessly. So I'm sure there are a number of reasons people could choose to do this, one of which turned out to be people looking for a ride late at night, maybe after leaving the bar. So obviously to us, it was really important to minimize the waste of resources in terms of responding to false reports. And so Originally, when we implemented this unit, the phone number was given to all of community members and anyone could call them. We kind of quickly realized that in an ideal world, although this is what you would want to do, it doesn't translate well to practice. So although it's more bureaucratic, now calls have to come from village leaders, so either an executive or the village chairman. And since we've implemented that route for reporting, I think it's created a lot more responsibility for the calls that are being reported, and we haven't received any more false reports. In the first several months of operation, we also had some pretty unsatisfactory metrics from the team itself. In part, this was due to the awareness taking so long to uptake in the community, but part of it was also due to the unit not being the most proactive. And that, in fact, is also related to oversight. So we think it's a huge advantage to have this unit positioned within the community, but it also leads to problems for oversight when they're so far removed from the management team that is actually responsible for them. Another issue has been the unit was supposed to go on daily patrols, and these were 100% just like not effective. They never encountered elephants on patrol. And we had this vehicle tracking software, and when we looked what the unit was doing, we assumed that because these are former game scouts, they know how to patrol. They know how to look for signs of animals. But basically the patrols they were going on were not strategic. They were going to the same places all the time, and they were rarely going on patrol. So two pretty significant issues. What we've done to address those and what has really helped in the last few months is first we focused on improving oversight. So now the unit is allocated and checks in with our central ops room. So when they arrive at a site, they check in over their geotagged radio that records their location and says, hey, we're here. And then the ops room initiates a report that when we go to check on it the next day, we know, okay, the mitigation unit should have a report on their tablet with all of the details from this incident. So it gives us a lot more accountability. The other factor is we do much more regular check-ins. So there's communication over the phone every day or every other day, and physical check-ins once a week. Our relationships management team is actually responsible for this unit, and it's a two-person team that's really overstretched. So a great thing that's happening is another person who is going to be hired, and part of their responsibility is to be a dedicated supervisor for this unit. We've also just, at the end of February, started more informed patrolling. So part of this unit's new responsibilities will actually be to go on foot patrols at different locations along the Rubana River that forms their geographic zone. One, to look for snares, because it's a snaring hotspot, but two, to look for signs of elephants that can focus their patrolling efforts in the evening as well. Another unexpected challenge is that it's really hard to drive a vehicle between fields when there's no paths without damaging even more crops. So in a context where crops are already being lost to elephants, it's something that you want to avoid, theoretically. We don't think that this is going to be completely avoidable, but we think it's another point to emphasize the importance of early detection. So we want to be aware of elephants before they've moved into shambas in order to push them back rather than having to drive a vehicle through farms. We expect to face a couple of additional challenges. So this unit hasn't been active for a full year, so we're coming up on the rainy season now. This was the Rubana River this past week. After a couple of days of rain, it transforms from a perfectly dry riverbed to a mess. Basically, all of these river channels fill in, and it becomes really difficult to navigate. And we also have a lot of black cotton soils in this area, which are really difficult to maneuver through in the rainy season. So we're hoping that the position of the team's base in Hanyari will minimize the effects of having to drive very far to get places, but we still expect this to be a challenge, and it remains to be determined how exactly we'll address it. Secondly, of course, we only have one unit at this time. So we're coming up on peak conflict season between May and June. We're expecting to see some competition for the unit's time in response to incidents, and managing expectations among community members is going to be really important. So in summary, although we have a lot of work left to do to improve the efficiency of our unit, we do see real value in terms of relationship building and conflict prevention that we're really looking forward to improving over time, and to seeing how it goes and how we can maximize efforts during the upcoming growing season. And I just wanted to quickly acknowledge all of the team members for the mitigation unit, the relationship team that runs it, and as well as our partners at TAWA. So that's it. Oh, I didn't mean to pose that, but I did.
Examples there of adapting as things develop and change. Great. Questions, Kristen? Oh, okay. Did you switch your mic off?
I did, yeah.
You did, okay.
Managing expectations from treaties is something we really struggle with as well. I'm just wondering if you guys have a plan and a strategy in place and how you're going to actually do that.
Yeah, so part of the effort that we're undergoing now in terms of that community by community kind of march to explain more about the unit, we'll have to bring up the fact that, hey, we're coming up on peak conflict season, we have one unit, we'll do the best we can to respond to as many units as we can, but it's going to be based on a call-by-call basis. And I think essentially all we can do in this context is to make community members aware that we're expecting lots of calls, and we'll do the best to get to where we can, but we won't be able to get to everyone. And also just to encourage them to keep calling, because what you don't want to happen is that people think like, oh, it's ineffective, they're never going to come, and then they stop reporting. So emphasizing the point that we're keeping track of all the calls we get. So if we continuously receive more calls than we can respond to, there's your motivation to fund additional units. But without those calls, there wouldn't be that rationale.
I was wondering, is there time, is the cross-breaking happening at night or during the day? And what is the likelihood? Because some of the challenges that we're going to develop is things that we have counted. Are you considering making the teams more mobile, like probably being break as opposed to
So most of the conflict does occur at night. We have a few calls every now and then during the afternoon. There was a really bad case of conflict last month that resulted in someone being killed that was at like 1 in the afternoon, but mostly at night. For us, we haven't considered motorbikes, primarily for a couple of reasons. One, during the rainy season, it's going to be even harder to get around on a motorbike. You're going to basically be not able to respond to anywhere where you have to go through mud. And secondly, it really is a team effort. So with a vehicle, you have the ability to have someone who's driving, someone who's communicating with a community member, someone operating the spotlight, and someone prepping materials. So on a motorbike, it would be really difficult to be able to use a deterrent while also driving.
I meant use of motorbike for surveillance, but it depends on the day. Because when we talked about people, the challenges of having to send a vehicle that is not effectively monitoring and covering a wide area. Sometimes we send people on motorbikes. That way they can cover a wide area, talk to many community leaders, but then that's subject to the terrain, as you're saying.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. It hasn't been brought up, but in terms of doing foot patrols, it would probably make way more sense for a couple people to go and drop in a location, cruise down the river, and be able to pop back on the motorbike. Thanks for that suggestion.
I have a question about safety. You're saying it happens at night.
Yeah.
You have one car, the roads are very narrow and not a lot of escape paths. Have there been issues with that, and especially as the elephants become familiar with perhaps if it's a non-threatening, non-poaching vehicle? If that could be an issue?
Yeah, I mean, my answer is absolutely. It could be. So a big component of that is the training that they have received from Honey Guide in terms of how to approach elephants in a responsible way that is not going to result in damage to you, the vehicle, or the elephant, which can be a challenge, absolutely. And we're hoping to do continuous training. We did have one incident where the vehicle was damaged, but so far we haven't experienced that yet. But it could be, and I think it's something that always has to be in the back of the team's mind, where you want to deter elephants, but never at the cost of putting yourself in danger where the only solution might be to pull a rifle out to shoot an elephant. So it's that constant balance, wanting to deter but not wanting to put people in unnecessary danger.
Is it appropriate only on elephants or you're looking at other wildlife?
For crop raiding, like in general?
Yeah.
So we do get some cases of buffalo occasionally. During the migration, wildebeest can also move through fields, but people don't complain about those too much because they make convenient meals. So, like if I'm being, yeah. But other animals, it does happen, but I just think the perceived risk is so great for elephants. We have a very large elephant population locally that is, from a management and a conservation perspective, that is our biggest concern.
Thanks for the talk, that was really interesting. First question is, why do you think elephants are moving out of the protected areas? Is it a corridor or is it targeting foraging on crops? And the second question is, you mentioned elephant elephant teams. Could you explain what those are and if you are engaging with them?
Sure, yeah. So first is the corridor question. So one of the reasons that we were really motivated to put these GPS collars on is because we actually don't have a good idea of why elephants are moving through village areas. We've always assumed it's purely for access to crops based on the timing of all of the conflict incidents. But there is this swamp that's about 30 kilometers north of the reserve that could serve as refuge habitat. I've heard it's very unlikely, but it's a possibility, and I'm looking forward to visualizing some of those movements with our collars. Second was...
elephant teams.
Oh yeah, so this is actually a really cool story. So you guys know FZS, Frankfurt Zoological Society. They were approached by this, well I guess actually they've implemented COCOBAs, so these community conservation banks in several communities, and they were approached by one of the villages that they work with because they wanted to basically start an elephant task force that would be responsible for patrolling their boundary with the reserve every single night. And what they did was every person that benefits from that COCOBA, like in order to participate, you have to somehow contribute to this elephant task force, to these patrolling efforts. So people on this team were very forward thinking. They see the benefits of the COCOBA as a direct benefit of conservation, and they know that their communities will do better if they're able to keep elephants out of fields, that poaching will decline, they'll receive all these benefits. So they totally formed this on their own. FZS helped them with data collection, and they've had a lot of success with it. And some of the surrounding communities have wanted to implement the same. So they've expanded that to 4 or 5 villages in the east. And then from the district level in Bunda, there's been a lot of interest in getting village-led groups together. So that has come purely from the community side and wanting to organize those. And I think our goal would, of course, be to communicate with them as collaboratively as we can. We know in the past it's been an issue when people have observed elephants moving out of the reserve and haven't communicated that to communities. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to be able to, if we have this information and it's not a security issue, that we should share that to let these task forces know that elephants are approaching.
Great, Kristen, thanks so much.